Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today. The title of today's webinar is How to Assess Security Weaknesses and Risks Across Your SAP Application Ecosystem. Our presenters today are Clemens Guter and Tim Kransky. And my name is Stephanie Anderson. I'm the Global Webinar Manager over here at Pathlock. Before Clemens and Tim introduce themselves, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any audio issues during this webinar, click on Preferences and then Audio. From there, you can check to see if you are using the appropriate audio device. You can also click on the play sound to check if you can hear the sound coming from your speakers. This presentation will take approximately 45 minutes. There will be a Q&A session following the presentation, so please type any questions into the Q&A chat box for our speakers to answer at the end of the event. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Tim and Clemens to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clemens Guter. I am one of the product management in Pathlock, and my responsibility is for vulnerability management and transport scanning and code scanning. And I'm happy I'm here today with Tim Kransky. I want to hand over to.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tim. So I'm manager in the security area of SAP since like about 20 years. Quite some time in order to see the developments and everything. And I'm very happy to be here today with you and Pathlock in order to show about this interesting theme complex we will talk about. And I will do some intro about the company and so on. So next slide, please. With introductions, we are already through. So following is a very short company and solution overview, of course, for all the folks out there who don't know us so well, maybe as a Pathlock, as a global player. And then, of course, we come to terms with vulnerability management. You can do with Pathlock, starting with security scanning, of course, proper configuration, efficient patch management, code vulnerability scanning. We show how to do vulnerability management, where to start, a short info about Linda, who works with us, who is our customer, and of course some key takeaways. Later you will have the time for some questions and answers from our side, of course. Okay, now to Pathlock. Pathlock already is a powerhouse because already millions of customers are monitored with Pathlock solutions pertaining to security and compliance in the security sector, in the IT. Billions of businesses activities are monitored actively, of course, in order to do that. And with 500 plus employees around the world, we are quite a player. And we can tell you that the typical return on invest achieved by our customers through automation, reduce cost and minimize risk exposure is a factor 10, which is not too bad, I think. And how this can work and how this brings, we show you later. So here you can see our global offices. You see the label Pathlock. Pathlock is a conglomerate from ZAST, Apsian, CSI, Security Weaver. So this is the Pathlock now, and you can see in every corner of the world you find Pathlock with its global offices. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, and here's, of course, and I have to show that, quite some interesting customers you might know. So it is representative. It is proven by many enterprises what we are doing here at Pathlock together with all our customers. We have even more. Not everyone wants to land on these slides, so we have hundreds and hundreds of customers we are already working. Next slide, please. And I said I will do just a short introduction about the company for all the guys who don't know us yet. So now we're going to start with the layers of comprehensive security. And yeah, I hand over to Clemens. Clemens, your stage.
Thank you, Tim, and for this nice intro. Before we go deep into vulnerability management, vulnerability detection, I want to give you a comprehensive security picture and discuss with 2 or 3 sentences what you have to do or what is the full picture. Always the basic is you make some role-based access control. Just have the roles for the right users, developers only the authorizations for development, managers for managers, and so on. The next layer is the attribute-based access. For example, that restrict only access from some IPs, only from the US you can access something, from India something else, and if you are not from your location, your IP range, then you are not allowed to do something. The next level is the vulnerability detection. This will be today's main topic, where we check some configurations, code scanning, transport management, and so on. And the last layer is the threat detection, where you detect and respond to threats in real time, where you, for example, have an automatic reaction to an attack. And for each of this layer, the Pavlok suite provides you something. I want just to add here, we have the 3 pillars with the enforced controls on the right side, the middle, the access components. And these are the first 2 levels, more or less, with the role-based and the attribute-based access control, and the application security, which we will point to today, especially the vulnerability management part, but it's also something like the threat detection and so on. So far to this general picture, now I want to start with a little insight into our daily work. Often when we get in touch with some customers, they have some different views on application security. For example, answer the question, is the platform secure? Many system owners and so on have like only a small view on their system because it's managed by others. For example, you have some host there, and the infrastructure is not part of our vulnerability management, and therefore I don't know anything about it. Also, many companies I faced in the last years have some ad hoc patching. They just patch if there's something coming up, but not in advance, and therefore it's a little bit chaotic, especially if something is urgent. And security overall is more like second priority. It's especially, for example, some role management is only doing someone besides his daily business, or the vulnerability management is only something which is done by side other things. So, for example, about 57% are not able to identify vulnerabilities on application level, just to say so. But it's also important to have, for example, especially in the SAP environment, some code reviews, some transport controls, and this also becomes a little bit tricky. For example, for the code reviews, you have millions of lines, and you can only make a manual code review and check everything. You have not really the big picture. You need something who has, who knows what it means if you have some finding. The documentation is only limited, and it's often only done in the development system, and so you have no idea what code is shipped to my production system. And last but not least, just to make this picture full, some threat detection and response, which will not be part of the today's topic, but just for the full picture. Often it's just some noisy monitoring, and you have no security operations center which supports you. Some logs are only manually reviewed, especially, for example, if there is something happened, some attack, you just make it afterwards and check what happened and so on, but it's not automatic, and so it's slow, or you even have only a limited view on the situation. And to have all this, it's important to have a vulnerability management. And therefore, I want to go to the next slide and to give some kind of definition based from the National Institute of Standards and Technology with the cybersecurity framework. It has 5 points, which all needs to be covered to have a comprehensive security setting. First, you need to identify that there is something to do. You need to make some asset management, some risk assessment, and you need some strategy behind. This needs to be done first, and if you have such a strategy, if you have some idea how you need this for your threats, you need to protect yourself. There are many points which are important, but the most one are the first 2 layers I mentioned before, with the role-based and the attribute-based things. It's also important to have some awareness about this topic. Every user should know there is something. But it's not enough. We need also to detect some anomalies, some events, and the whole configuration needs to be checked. If there is something, you need a proper response. You need to find out that there happened something. You need to make some communications, preferred way, some automatic communications, and so on. And the last pillar is to recover, that you can go as fast as possible back to normal operations. This is not an one lane point, it's more a cycle. If you have such a recover plan, such a recover things, you also need to go back and identify, and this is more a cycle process. And our suite, just to make the picture perfect, supports you especially with the middle part to protect, to detect, and to respond on threats. And this is one part of our vulnerability management. But what does vulnerability management for Pavlok means? Therefore, I just pointed out some points which we think are very important, especially in the SAP environment, what you have to figure out just to have a vulnerability management tool to set up some vulnerability management. We think it's very important to have some dashboard where you can see what findings I have, what are the problems, and that they are prioritized just to resolve them, starting with the highest prioritizations. At next point, if you have a dashboard, you also need some data. You need to do some validations for each application instance, especially in SAP environment. It also means for the OS, for some web dispatchers, databases, and so on. You need to scan them and get the validation. Also, it's important to check this configuration and if all the patches are properly installed. We think it's really needed to have some custom code scanning to minimize the risk, and together with this, some transport scanning, because transport management is one of the major parts where you can bring data from one to another SAP system, but it's also a door for some threats. Additionally, some interfaces should be monitored and hardened. And if there are some regulatory compliances, you need to cover them within your tool. These points are leading us to the following challenges. In SAP systems, you have thousands of security relevant settings, besides some parameters and so on. And this leads into a potential weakness on many layers. These complex applications make it for most people really difficult to assess everything and to find out what is my actual state on my system, especially since one SAP system needs a secured state on all levels, including the application, the normal ABAP system, for example, the databases, the OS, and also the network. Additionally, there's a problem that you often have not only one system, you have a landscape based on a QA system and dev system for sure, and some production system, and maybe you also have many landscapes. And so it makes it even harder to have a comprehensive picture of all the states. So what are the requirements? You need some tool or, yeah, let's say tool which validates all relevant infrastructure and software components in the SAP systems, including, for example, the OSS nodes if the security relevance are installed, some patches, and also support packages. You need to check about the configurations, especially since from time to time there are new points which needs to be covered and so on, and you need a report about this state. It's good to have some change management, some transport management, and some software development control within the solution. And you really need the safety relevant parameters and settings that someone tells you what should be the expectation. So you do not need to know everything because of this complex levels. Therefore, this is our expectation on a tool. And now I want to go a little bit more in detail what we offer, what our solution can bring you. And first of all, I want to go to the left side to this pyramid. Our solution covers all the layers based on the database or as basis the OS and the network, go over to the application level and also to the presentation level where you have the application and transaction. But it's not only for one system. We also give you an opportunity to extend it to multiple systems, landscapes, to many systems to have a proper look into all your systems. And we also support some cloud solutions. And what is inside and the PowerFlock solution? We support you with vulnerability scans and policy assessment in accordance to some legal regulations, some internal requirements, and many more. We give you an up-to-date policy checks based on the SAP security baseline, on the SAP user group audit guide, and some governmental security recommendations. Out of the box, our solution comes with more than 4,000 checks and security notes, which you can directly work with if you do not want to add something more. We have about 150 individual checks for your HANA databases. And what is important, that we have also monthly updates according to SAP security patch days. So you're always up to date. And last but not least, all our checks are customizable for each individual customers. And it's also possible to just add some custom checks if you want to add something and so on. But so far to the theory. In the next step, I want to give you a little demo into our dashboard. There could be many more demos here, but we have only a limited time. And so I want to show you a little bit about the dashboard. You can see it here. The dashboard is to find out what is the current state, to have an audit state of the systems and to figure out what could be next. Also, is our current state, for example, valid, or do we need to add something? On this first page here, you have an overview about your systems. In this outer circle, it's only a limited scope because it would be made way too much if I added here everything. But here we have just a limited scope of these systems based in US, Germany, and Italy. And you see on the first hand side that we have some problems in each of the systems, some very high problems. Also many high and so on. But the first page is only giving you an introduction that we have something. The next tab I want to figure here, or I want to show you here, is what areas we cover. Currently, I only added here in this outed circle some code security checks. They are here labeled as ABAP problems, some patches. I checked the patch status of the systems, and I checked some parameters, some configurations. And for example, for the 3 systems, especially the patching is not up to date currently. We have some very high issues with the coding, and we have a lot of issues, but only some very high issues with the configuration here. But you think, oh, I have here an overview, but I don't know what to do or what is the issues. This you find in the risk details. I want to mention here in the first state that you have only an overview in this UI5 application. If you need some more details, we provide them in our SAP GUI. You can also access it from Fiori Launchpad, but it's not included here, just so you know it. Here it's only the overview about the problem. But let me first filter them a little bit, because so we have it based on the areas. The ABAP, as I said, are the code scanning problems. For example, you have 16 reports or parts where you have some delete report statement. It's very critical because you can delete everything in the system, so it needs to be fixed. Or you have, for example, 2 occurrences of some dynamical work clauses in update and delete statements. Also very tricky parts, because you can adapt them if you have some debug authorizations and get to like all data and change it. So you know here you have for the S4H system, you have to fix them. But also if we want to have a look, for example, in the basis checks, you have some SNC is not activated for the systems and so on. And here you can figure out the details, and if you need a proper description and also what is the problem and more details, you need to go in the SAP GUI here. This is only the overview. But last but not least, I want to give you an outlook in the trend analytics. Most of our customers are liking this because you see some, or you can make some reports to management and so on, what is fixed and how it's done. We have here 2 graphs. First is the risk IDs. Risk ID mean this finding type, like for example, delete report statement is one risk ID, and doesn't matter how many times it occurs, it's only one time here in this graph. And the other graph is the real amount of risks. So let me switch to this one. I prepared here some findings over the last quarter, and we fixed some to have here, or you can see them. Don't worry, we have a lot of findings here, but it's just for demo purpose. So we will never fix them all. But here you can also see the process for fixing everything. So far to our Security Information Center, which is our reporting tool and also our overview tool. Now I want to jump back into the slides and figure out a little bit more about the question where to start with vulnerability management. It's really hard if you have not a proper understanding at the moment, and you need to start somewhere, and then you need to go step by step in a direction of a perfect state. But first, you need to define a state, for example, based on some legal requirements, some internal requirements, SOX compliance parts, and so on. And if you have the definition of your target state in many fields, then you need to make a scan and get your actual state. This might look really bad, this might look good, depends on the definition of the target state. And afterwards, you need to go step by step, starting with the very high issues and so on to make it better. So you have, for example, in the first iteration, the permissions and user accounts are fixed, but database, for example, looks bad. In the next one, it looks better and better and better, and sometime in the future, you have your actual state. And your actual state should look like your target state. What you do then is to make a periodic cycle scanning where you always check your target state against your actual state and try to hold it green here or to get it to no findings. And so you can control your systems of vulnerability management. You also need, as I said before, to this framework from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, you have to adapt your target state if there is some changes. And we help you to provide this and to get here a full picture and to find out which parameters needs to be figured out and so on. With this said, I want to hand over once more to Tim because he is responsible for the customer Linde Group and he wants to give you a little bit insight how he did it there. So Tim.
Thanks, Clemens. Yeah, Linde Group, just one of our customers, but of course a large customer and a very good customer who's also talking for us at events and so on. So I thought I'd take this example because it perfectly fits also here. So Linde Group of companies does gases and of course for medicine and chemistry, sorry, also engineering. So they are working worldwide and they came and asked, hey, can you do something about our SAP security? Because what we already did is we are very keen on security, and we already working with the security operations center, a SOC center. So this was like in 2015 or so, when I remember correctly. And they said, okay, we have everything on the line. We can detect, we can assure quality with vulnerability management and so on, but nobody can do SAP properly for us because everyone claims, yeah, we can also do SAP, and no one can. And so we said, yeah, yes, we can. What we do is now we show you how we assess risk. We bring this with our software and our knowledge and services to your SOC center. Of course, we are doing and teaching you, after all, the vulnerability management with your SAP guys, and bring SAP guys who are knowledgeable in SAP also into the security sector, because this is something you find very seldom. Someone who is good in SAP, the specialized application, and also security, which is quite a challenge. So we bound it together, the software, the services, and what we finally reached with Linde was what we said. So Linde today can actively handle with their own security operational centers and their teams and their partners. They choose their security in SAP, of course, still using our pathlog software, of course, talking with us. So we have regular calls, but we enabled them, and this, you can say, in the end, for the relatively low price for what they got from it. So this is a great example how one can do it. So they were very security aware. There are big customers who are not so aware as them, and always the Mittelstand or smaller customers are not aware of security, but one should, because it is time now to do something here. So this was the example Linde Group, and Clemens, your turn again, I think with the key takeaways already.
You're right, and thank you for this nice insights into the Linde Group. Yeah, let me sum up our story today. We started a little bit with just an overview about what comprehensive security measurements mean and so on. Afterwards, I showed you a little bit what are common states of vulnerability management. Then we go through what did we understand under vulnerability management, and here we are. It's very important to avoid some blind spots because it's so many data and it's so many configurations and so on. It's really important to integrate your SAP security strategy into your enterprise-wide solution because otherwise it's hard to get on this prioritization which it needs. Afterwards, how you should do it. Like I showed some slides ago, you should define such a target state. You should scan it regularly and implement the measures to reach this state and to hold the state afterwards, which is also the the things provided by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, this framework. And it's important to have your security status of all your systems, preferable in one dashboard, just to see everything which you are accountable for, responsible for, and to have it transparent, everything. Last point from my side to remember is such a periodic cycle is really important to find out, is something changed? Are some parameters should have new values based on the latest recommendations and so on. And I will finish now with the sentence, keep your security up to date. It's really important that you do not hold just some state and you like to freeze it. It's also a moving process and you always need to be aware of there is something which is changing.
Yeah, and it can be super easy with real complex and very developed software, which makes it easy for you out there as customers in order to keep your security in line with vulnerability management of Pathlog. Clemens, thank you very much. I see 2 questions now, and I think we said we want to do a Q&A session for everybody who has questions about this interesting theme complex. Of course, the first one I think is for me, can you change the priority of a certain security issue from high to very high if you consider this applicable for your own organization? Yes and no. So yes, in principle, if you have sufficient rights for it, and if you are, for example, the security manager for the line, and no, you can't if you don't have the sufficient rights, because also in our dashboards in the security line we have at Pathlog, we are working with user rights in SAP properly.
So maybe let's also let me add just something. If for our suite, if you have the proper authorization to change this checks in such an audit policy, to make it a little bit more technical, it is possible. You can change the priority, you can change like everything. It's customer changeable, but not if this audit one already was running, then the state is not changeable anymore.
All right, thank you very much. So this is the yes and no question. I try to answer, and at least we have the technical measurement in order to steer what can be done or not. But it is possible in principle, of course, in the Pathlog software. And the second one is directly for you, Clemens. how you keep the database with the rule set that you check against, for example, latest patches, OS with database with up to date.
So it's a good question, to be honest. There are two main parts we support here. The first part is with each release we also offer a content update. And this content update means you can have a new content for all our 4,000 checks, and they are developed with the latest informations we have, with the latest content and so on. And also, if we find out there is some need to make it in between some releases, we would also ship it to you. This is for all the checks, the 4,000s, and we also implement more and more based on our findings with our security team. The second one is especially for these patch levels. We provide also a transport or a content, content update regularly, where you get a list with the latest important OS nodes and so on. This is especially for these patch levels. And we listed which versions, for example, subnodes are relevant to implement. And you can also, if you have this configured, make then a connection to the SAP database for the OSS nodes with the subnode browser. I think it's S-node transaction. The same functionality is used to always get the latest version.
All right.
To always get the latest version of this OSS nodes and to know this is up to date. Otherwise, you have to wait for our content update, which may be a little bit slower if you do not have this connection, but you would also provide this information.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer, Carsten. So I don't see, I hope your question was answered, Leonard, properly. And I have one more. So ladies and gentlemen, dear attendees, please feel free to ask questions. We have some minutes left. And the next one we have here from Adnan is we already have stock in place maintained by vendor for security purpose. Does this product still provide more value to consider it for implementation?
It's a hard question to answer because I do not know what your security operations center is offering you in detail. But I guess what's the main advantage from our point of view is that you have a transparent overview about all your assessments. And I'm not 100% sure which will be the content here for you, so it's hard to make too much in detail. And we have one solution which gives you the full picture based on all these 4 layers I told you, based on role attributes and even until the threat detection. Yeah. And especially in the threat detection part, you have the one and all solution here. I guess maybe...
I would say, so this was very cautiously, thank you very much. So I can tell from my experience the SOC vendors out there in the world, and there are many, of course, there are some bigger players, there are smaller players. We can combine what we have and integrate in every SOC you have out there. And why can we do it? And why this is asked by many customers is just like your usually SOC center usually offers, let's say, let's say in the rest of the IT and not in SAP. So you know everything about IP addresses, about network, about maybe if it is better than others, about some applications. But the question here is, do you have already SAP covered? And I name the complete SAP security you can do with a Pathlock solution integrating in SOC centers. I know, for example, a very big vendor who has a nice looking software, but they are missing all the thousands of test cases we have in order to check the system settings, in order to go for the programming of third-party SAP applications, for the code, in order to look into this data masking, whatever we have here in line. And this is just not there. So be cautious with vendors who say somehow we also cover SAP, because usually they cover something in the network, but not even the network layer in SAP properly, because SAP is different in many kinds, not in the application layer, not in the different layers Clemens already showed. So it might be definitely worthwhile, Adnan, to take a deeper look in what we are offering, what you already have. But thank you very much for this question. I hope the answer was something you can do something with. Okay, thanks, Adnan. You're right, makes sense. Thanks for answering the questions. SOC mostly covers network. Okay, this is typical. This is simply typical out there. So they tell you you cover everything, because in the old IT, I'm an older guy, I can say this. You had this network layer. You said, I'm doing something about the network, and everything will be fine. But in reality, there are packages, your firewall and whatever does not know, coming through every day. And then you need security in depth in order to see what you can do with this. So you are not covered by that in SAP at all. Yeah, do we have more questions? Not that I see some currently. So if you have further questions to our team, to Pathlock, please feel free to write us, to phone us, to contact us somehow over the webpage. And we will be happy to answer all your questions and show you what you can get. Okay, Stephanie, I think there are no more questions.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Clemens and Tim, and thank you everyone for your question. We have a few announcements to go over. Our next webinar on this topic will be automating SOD control monitoring across your landscape, and that will be on Wednesday, September 7th at 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And then we have another webinar coming up, how to enhance and extend SAP role-based controls, on Thursday, September 15th at 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time. So if you would like to join either one of those, just be on the lookout for the email announcements, or they'll be posted on LinkedIn to register for those. And with that, can you go to the next slide, Clemens? I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you at future webinar events.
And yes, it will be shared for review. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for this last question.
Yes, it will be. The recording will be shared to all people that registered in your email.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you.
you.
A nice day.
Have a great day or great evening wherever you are in the world currently. Bye-bye.